Now, it's rare that as journalists we write stories about ourselves, but today our special correspondent Lucy Manning has done just that, and for very good reason. Lucy's detailed her 2-year battle from when she received a sexually explicit phone call from an unknown caller to getting him convicted. And Lucy joins us live now. And Lucy, not only did you have to experience that awful event in the first place, but then this absolute nightmare fight for justice. Just talk us through it.
Yes, well, I mean, just to start by saying that some of this involves some sexually explicit details. It has been an absolute ordeal over the last 2 years dealing with the police on this and dealing with the court system. And I have never written a story about myself. That's not the sort of journalism that I do. But I broke that rule because I thought it was really important to highlight that although we have warm words from the police and the justice system about taking sexually motivated crimes against women seriously, actually in practice that isn't happening. And certainly in my case, I wanted to show just how difficult it was to get justice and that the police were quite prepared to drop the case until I had to sort of take control of it and appeal it and fight back. It all started in October 2022, so more than 2 years ago. My phone went in the evening, my mobile phone, it was a withheld number. I answered it and it was quite clear that somebody was masturbating down the phone, a man. He knew my first name. He was making sexually explicit comments, and I immediately shut down the call. And he kept calling back. And I sprang into journalist mode, really, and I realised that this man would need to be reported, that I would need evidence. So I have another phone for work. I grabbed that phone. I accepted the next call that he made. I put it on speakerphone, recorded for more than 5 minutes to get the evidence, and then turned off the phone. He then called back a few more times. And I was worried. I was worried. Did he know who I was? He knew my first name. He seemed to have my phone number. Who was it? I didn't recognize the voice. And it was all quite concerning. I called 999. I reported it to the police. And I thought it would be pretty simple, that they would just trace the withheld number. They had the evidence of the call and they would go and arrest and charge him. I was unfortunately very naive on that. It started off with the Met Police, who asked me to approach my phone company to get the withheld number. My phone company were very clear that that's not the job of the victim, that the Met have a special way to do that. And when I messaged the officer back, they said, oh, sorry, we're obviously working on old information. It was then passed on to another bit of the Met, who said, well, they didn't think there would be enough evidence because it was a withheld number to be able to work out who it was. There was a sort of almost like a shrug of the shoulders, it felt. In fairness, I suppose, to the Met, it took them a couple of months, but they did trace the number. And it turned out this was a man in the Lancashire area, so it was past the Lancashire police. This is now January 2023. So I assumed Lancashire police would now know the name of the suspect. They had my evidence. They would go and arrest and charge him. Pretty simple, I thought. It didn't turn out to be that way. Essentially, Lancashire police told me they didn't have what they said was the necessity to arrest. So they would go and knock on this man's door. They did that a couple of times. They told the neighbours they were looking for him. And I was really concerned for two things, really. One, that they'd given him the wherewithal to destroy the phone, get rid of the evidence. He knew they were looking for them. And also, I was really concerned. I've done a lot of reporting, unfortunately, on violence against women, harassment against women. I'd reported the case of Sarah Everard and Wayne Cousins, the police officer who had committed indecent exposures before he went on to murder Sarah. And they're seen as a red flag. So I wanted this man stopped because I was worried that he could go on to commit more serious offences. And eventually, after my pushing, they did go and arrest this man. Great, I thought. We've now got some progress. But surprise, surprise, he said that he had lost the phone. He hadn't made the calls. He denied it. And this went on for months. And eventually, the police came back to me, Lancashire police, and said they were just dropping the case, that there was not enough evidence and they couldn't charge him. And as you can imagine, I was absolutely furious because they had connected this man to the number, and they knew that there was that connection. And I had recorded his voice and I had the evidence. So I told Lancashire Police I wanted to appeal it. I wasn't quite sure how you do that. But I said I wasn't happy with the decision. I wanted to appeal it. It turns out there is a victims' rights review with the police, as well as with prosecutors, but with the police as well. And Lancashire Police effectively reviewed my case under the victims' rights review and agreed that they would keep trying to get more information. So they did some more phone checks, and surprise, surprise, it took another couple of months. It turned out that, yes, he had a different SIM card. He destroyed the SIM card and my number was on it, and he'd called me 9 times. So they told me they were going to bring him in, going to rearrest him, re-interview him. Except that didn't happen quickly. And I started texting the officer saying, why haven't you rearrested him? Why haven't you brought him back in? You said this was significant new evidence, but nothing's happened. There's no sense of urgency. And one of the senior officers admitted that he felt the case had stalled and he would try and find out why. Eventually, they did bring him in. They did rearrest him. He denied it again. And it took to, I think it was December 2023, so more than a year after he had called me, Lancashire Police finally charged him. A massive delay then for the court case, I think 9 months. And it was supposed to be heard at Lancaster Magistrates Court a couple of weeks ago. And I went up to Lancaster. It was listed for 9:30 in the morning. The case was heard at 5 p.m. and he hadn't turned up. And the magistrates decided they would give him the benefit of the doubt, that maybe because of the postal system, he hadn't received the letter telling him that there'd been a change in the court date. And then I just happened to call on Monday to say, when is the case now being heard? And I was told, oh, it's been listed for this afternoon in a couple of hours' time. So I had no way of getting up to, I think it was Burnley Magistrates Court it was being heard in. And I really wanted to see justice being done. I wanted to see this man that had made these calls. And I wasn't able to be there, but a colleague, Nick Garnett, based in Salford, he went and he heard the man called Amjad Khan from Blackburn deny the charges, say that someone else had probably used his phone. And luckily, the magistrates found him guilty. So finally, after more than 2 years, I got a conviction. He'll be sentenced in a couple of months. That will take a bit more time. But unbelievably, when I was researching this story this week to write it for the BBC website, I discovered an article from the Lancashire Telegraph from nearly a decade ago that reported that this man had been found guilty nearly a decade ago of more than 15,000 obscene calls over a 3-month period. So it was clear this man was a prolific offender. And it even had a quote from the time from a Lancashire police officer. So the whole experience just felt that it was a struggle for the police to take it seriously, a struggle to get the conviction. And I don't feel that getting justice should be the victim's struggle. We put all this to the Met and to Lancashire, and the Met admitted that their investigation clearly fell short. Lancashire Police said initially it didn't meet the standards expected. But since it's gone on the website this morning, I've had an enormous response from people, a lot of women, saying that this really resonates with them and they feel that the police still don't take offences against women seriously.
Lucy, I've got to say, just listening to you, and I've read your article, your perseverance is an absolute testimony to your strength, because I'm sure so many people, if they'd experienced that, they would have given up. That sense of frustration that you express is feeling it, really feeling it. It resonates so much. So thank you, because hopefully it will give other people who've experienced this. It's not easy experiencing something this at the best of time, but then writing about yourself is really hard for journalists. It really is. But thank you for sharing that. And Lucy also mentioned that the article is on the website. It really is worth reading it and going through it, because it is just incredible what she had to go through to get justice. So this really giving a voice to other people potentially in this experience. Don't give up, I think, is the message. Lucy Manning there, our special correspondent. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks.
Incredible story, incredible strength there from my colleague.